Okay, everyone give now to 3, 2, 1. Okay, I'm going to talk to you about risk management. Mine is not nearly as exciting as Daniel and Kyler, but he did make me feel better. If I mess up, it's okay. Okay, one of the greatest misconceptions about risk management is equating it with insurance. Churches saying, I don't have to worry about risk management, we have insurance. But insurance is a form of risk financing, and it really only comes into play if that risk actually happens. The principal focus of risk management is preventing the risk from happening in the first place. Okay? Rather than focusing on having a risk management policy, churches need to have a risk management strategy. Policies typically get set in a filing cabinet and collect dust. A strategy is something that you work every day. It's a mindset that you have. This is what we do. This is how we operate. And so then it becomes second habit. Okay? And I lost my place. It can't just be a commitment of a single person, though. You have one person that's in charge of security. Everyone needs to be involved in risk management, because if not, then when that one person leaves, then the whole program falls apart. Everyone needs to be involved. Almost every church will have property insurance, and most of them have liability insurance, but you also need to look closely at the coverage that you have, the coverage limits that you have, to make sure that you have the proper limits on your property, not what it's worth, but what it would cost to replace. Okay? You may have a keyboard that you bought for $6,500 10 years ago, but if you had to replace and get the same caliber keyboard today, what would that cost you? That's what you need to insure for. You also need to look at any exclusions to the policy. A lot of people don't even realize that there are exclusions, that there are things that your policy specifically says it will not cover until something happens. I'm from Louisiana, and in Hurricane Katrina, a lot of people realized when the levees broke that there were exclusions in their policy, even for their homes, for floods. And so they thought, well, I have homeowners insurance, and this was an act of God, and it covers that, and so I'll be able to replace my home. But because the levees broke, and that was actually from a flood and not from the hurricane, and they didn't have flood insurance because they may not have been in a flood zone, then there was an exclusion for that, and they lost everything. They didn't get anything back. So you need to go through your policy really carefully. If you're not well versed in that, which not very many of us are, call your policy holder, call your agent, sit down with them, take the time. It may take 2 hours, but when something happens, you'll be so thankful that you took the time to go through that policy and make sure that everything that you need to cover is covered. Also, make sure that you are covered for financial misconduct, for theft, and then make sure that other people's personal property can be covered if it's a victim of theft. A lot of musicians in churches leave their own drums at the church, or their own guitars or amplifiers. You need to make sure with your insurance company that those things are covered, because a lot of times instruments are easy to carry away. They're usually the first thing that's robbed. So make sure that if something were to happen to Brother Bob's guitar while it's on your platform, that your policy will cover that, because you may not have the $8,000 to replace whatever's stolen. So make sure that your policy will cover other people's personal property. Let's talk about screening workers and volunteers. We stress this every time that we get you together for Refueled, for camp meeting, every year for the summit. We go over and over it, but it's because it's important. We cannot stress enough the importance of screening your workers, your staff, and your volunteers in your church. The reason most often that we don't screen is because we think, oh, that can never happen here. And we trust these people that we work with. But those reasons aren't going to cut it if something actually happens. The standard in the legal system is reasonable care. That's all we're asked to achieve. But that is a very low standard. Our standard shouldn't be reasonable care, meaning, well, we checked. Our standard should be loving care. We screen workers and volunteers because we love our members and their children enough that we want to protect them. I know that it's difficult if you're in a small church, in a rural community where everyone's known each other for a long time, to start that conversation and say, well, now we have to background check. And people are going to say, but you've known me forever. But the thing is, it's important enough that you're going to do what's awkward, that you're going to take on that challenge, because it's important to make sure the children are safe and the people in your congregation. Children are just as likely to be molested in a small town as they are in a big city. It's not a problem that is geographical or ethnical. It invades everyone. So we need to protect our children. The biggest obstacle, like I said, is to overcome the belief that no one here would do that because we know everyone. But the question is, to what extent do church leaders want to protect their congregation? Ultimately, rooted in the word pastor is shepherd, whose primary duty is to protect the vulnerable and the innocent. One starting point is to have a written application. If you have a written application, then they write it down and don't just stick it in a drawer. Go through and check those references. Call the pastors that they've worked for before. A lot of times we get references and we put them in a drawer and never check on them. Do the work to follow up on that and keep it in a file so that you have proof that if something ever were to happen, God forbid, that you have proof that you did do your reasonable duty. You also have to have a signed consent form to do a background check. Before we were saying just send us their social security number and this information and we could do it, but even the background check company that we use is now requiring us to have a signed consent form. But we can send that to you. Just let us know. We'll email it right over to you. We can still have a couple days turnaround on those, and it's still just $10. That's a small price to pay to make sure that you're protecting the people in your church. They need to develop a strategy to protect and secure your property. One of every 5 churches in America experienced theft last year, and 16% of all churches experienced some form of vandalism. Another thing to consider and address is dealing with fire or natural disasters such as a hurricane or a flood, like the people in South Carolina are dealing with now. What would your congregation do if the sanctuary burned down? What would they need in order to hold services until the church can be rebuilt? I know our first thing is, well, we'd file an insurance claim. But that takes a long time to get filed, even longer to rebuild. What would you do in the interim? Hopefully you're not just going to quit holding services. Those people need you. So what would you do in the interim? Everyone typically has insurance for such an event, but the typical church has no plan in place to address those aspects of it. What do you do until you can rebuild? Another thing to consider is how to prevent and handle slips and falls by people who use your building, especially if it's an outside group, someone else that you let use your building. They need to provide their own liability insurance for while they're on your property. And I know that's a headache. It's an extra step to make them get that. But people today are not shy about suing a church. They will sue you in a second. So do the extra step on the front end so that you don't have the headache on the back end. More and more we hear reports of violence happening in churches. There are shootings happening in places of worship right here in America, and we hear about it all the time. With regards to acts of violence, there is little a church can do to prevent somebody who's intent on harming other people from carrying that through. Cover them in prayer, but other than that, there's not a whole lot you can do. If they want to hurt people, people are crazy and they'll hurt people. What you can do is make sure you secure your building and your property. Make sure you do basic things such as making sure you have proper lighting around your building, proper lighting in the parking lot, around your doors. Monitor the parking lot during services. Have an usher or a board member, someone make passes through the parking lot frequently during service. Make sure that your parking lot is well lit. We have a lot of people, especially youth groups, have lock-ins. They're outside at night, and parking lots are dimly lit. We need to make sure that you have those things lit so that people can see. There have been a number of cases where church members have been assaulted, raped, or even killed in church parking lots. A lot of churches have activities at night, so make sure those parking lots are lit. You need to train your staff, especially the church secretary, how to respond to transients and homeless people who may come in asking for money. People see that it's a ministry, they see that it's a church, they do it here in our office, and they come in and want money. And we want to help people, I understand. But you also need to train your secretary to know what to do and how to handle those people. We don't want to make her feel uncomfortable. She's in the building by herself a lot of times. Make sure that she's well trained on how to handle that so that she's not at danger too. There are also some other risks that a church might not think about. For example, what happens if your pastor has a heart attack and he's suddenly incapacitated? Who's going to take care of the matters of the church? What if the church wants to be able to provide financially for the pastor's family, even if it's a pastor who's not salary? Especially then, you may want to be able to help that pastor out, but if you haven't prepared for that beforehand, you may not have anything to give him. So you need to think about those things beforehand. Let's talk about social media. That's a new thing that we don't usually think about in risk management, but everybody now has some type of social media account. You have Facebook, you have Twitter, you have Instagram, and if they tell you they don't, they're lying. Everybody uses it. Everybody does. So there's some things you need to think about. One, you should probably have a social media policy that any of your staff or volunteers has to sign in order to agree to these things if they're going to be part of your staff or even part of your volunteers. Agreeing that they won't post private or confidential information about the church. If they're on the church grounds, they may overhear things in counseling, overhear prayer requests. They need to sign something agreeing that they will not post those things and publish them out there for other people to hear. What happens in the church stays in the church. You also need to make sure that they sign something saying that they agree to let someone who is whoever you designate for the church to be their friend on Facebook, so the church can monitor those type of things. They also need to, especially if they're on your staff, not be posting things that are vulgar or things that are sinful, posting nasty pictures or things with curse words in them, because then everybody sees, well, Sister Jill works in the children's ministry, and last night she was posting things with curse words in it. No, protect the image of your church. Make them sign those policies. We have sample policies that we can send you. You also need to, whoever is monitoring or posting on behalf of the church, like the Sunshine Conference, we have our Facebook page. Whoever's going to be doing that posting, there should be a separate policy that they sign. Things that are allowed, things that are approved for them to post, and that sort of thing, so that you make sure that you're not talking bad about the church down the road, and that you're not posting things in the heat of the moment because you're angry at brother so-and-so. Those are other things that need to be addressed that before we would have never even thought about. But social media is so prominent these days, and it's a great evangelistic tool, and it's free for the most part. But there do need to be parameters and guidelines on that. I only have a few minutes left, so I'm going to be real fast. But in your party box, you all got wherever it's at, you all got one of these about Safe Church. Safe Church is an awesome new resource that I actually just found out about, that's through our insurance company. But through Safe Church, it's a website that has a lot of resources pertaining to risk management, sample policies, and training tools, and things that you can use, checklists, online assessments, things that you can do. And you can participate in it for free because we are Guide One customers. Guide One is the insurance company that we use here at the office. If you're looking for an insurance company for your church, Guide One, they're just awesome. And we get no kickbacks from that, but they're great. They work a lot with churches. But because we are part of Guide One, then they offer this resource, Safe Church. And all you have to do, there's the packet in your party box where it gives you information on how to register with them, and it has our access code so that it shows them that you're part of us. But on there, like I said, there's online assessments, there's sample policies, there's checklist that you can do monthly and annually to go through, and it goes through everything from making sure that carpet's nailed down correctly, that there's not trips in your sidewalk, to making sure that your staff is trained properly, that everyone is background checked. It has key components to having a financial safeguard program, how many people should do the offering, and how many people should take it to the bank, and how often should that happen. It has an emergency action and recovery plan packet that actually is so long it has a table of contents, but it covers everything. Like we were talking about what to do in the case of a fire, what to do if there's a flood, all these things, and it goes step by step by step. And if you take the time to go through that, then it'll hit all the things that you may not have thought about or that you may have missed. And then you keep this packet together. You fill it in, you keep it together in one place, and everybody on the staff knows where it is. So if something were to happen, then you go, okay, these are the people that we call if there's a pipe that bursts. These are the people that we call if this happens or that somebody falls down. And once a year, we need to go through our annual checklist and make sure that everything is working properly, that everything's okay. Those are all just important things to do. But through that website, Safe Church, and if you need help registering or logging on, or you have any questions about it, give me a call here at the office. And it'll just really help you think of things that you didn't think of before. And my time's up, but we love you. And if you have any questions, text Miss Rachel, and we'll help you out.